It's good to see you. So now the president is going to put Iran-backed Houthis back on the terror watch list, but the president had delisted them, one of the first things he did in 2021, in February. But now John Kirby just moments ago said removing the Houthis was not a mistake. What's going on here? What do you think?
I think that's double speak. Look at what they did on the southern border with everything that was working as well. And look what that's ended up being. I think between it, the economy, and now the weakness we project internationally, there shouldn't be more of a plate full of things to work with for our side of the aisle. Let's talk about the consequences. You take them off the list. Remember, under the Trump administration, we took out Soleimani, Iran's mischief maker. You had none of that occurring. Here, you remove a group that says death to America, death to Israel, and think they're going to behave well. Well, then they start floating missiles at your ships, forcing you to go all the way around the southern tip of Africa, costing a fortune. You give any leash to people like them, you should not be naive to think that it's going to be working out somehow. And you pay the price in the long run, and look at the mess that's come along the way.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, shipping costs are doubling, if not quadrupling. Economists like Mohammed El-Arian is now warning this could reignite inflation. I mean, do you fear, by the way, the Houthis have attacked, to what you're saying, nearly 36 commercial ships. Do you fear escalation in the Mideast? Because Iran has been doing missile strikes in Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria in just a 24-hour period. Are you worried about all this?
Well, yes, because obviously they view us as someone that will not defend a red line, give you plenty of latitude, and then act like maybe they're doing you a favor when they quit shooting at you. So that whole dynamic has got to change, and I think it's easy to see what was working before. We projected strength. I cited what Trump did when you had Soleimani starting to poke the bear. Well, he took care of that, and it really worked well. We undid all of that, and now are dealing with this same problematic dynamic, not only on our southern border, in the Red Sea, and really across the world, because people view us as weak, feckless, not reacting until you have to.
And, you know, we reported yesterday Iran reportedly is on the ground in Yemen directing Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping with commanders, missiles, and drones. But the rhetoric coming out of the White House increasingly is concerning a lot of Americans, because it's what you're calling doublespeak. Let's watch outgoing climate czar John Kerry think the president is doing a great job on foreign policy. Watch this.
I am going to campaign very happily because I think he's done a terrific job. He's shown experience. He's kept us from, having a complete breakout of uncontrolled war in many regions. But at the same time, he stood up for American values, global values, universal values, for America's obligations with respect to Ukraine, the Middle East, and elsewhere.
We've got war in Ukraine, Israel with Hamas, Red Sea airstrikes disrupting trade from Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, and Iran bombing in Pakistan, Syria, and Iraq. So what is John Kerry talking about, sir?
Liz, the audacity of making a statement like that, I saw it when it hit fresh. I couldn't believe it. That is like a bizarro world interpretation of what's really going on. Sad thing is, they think that through that doublespeak, and then maybe try to throw a little diplomacy in there, that you can just smooth it all over. Well, look what happened on the southern border. You've now accumulated to where you've got all these people that have come across illegally, the costs that is being incurred here, not to mention, 170 people on the terrorist list coming across. So all of this stuff adds up. Just the most recent example, though, is right there in the Red Sea, that you can measure it in dollars and cents, as well as just terrible policy. They can't cover it up. We need to litigate it, and I hope that when we go into November of 24, that people at the ballot box make a hard, loud expression that this has got to stop. You can't try to fool the American public with this crazy policy that we know has not worked.
You know, Senator, you mentioned the border. Voter polls show increasing concern about the collapse at the U.S. border, including Democrat voters. The White House just is having a meeting right now about funding Ukraine over funding border security. Where do you come down on this? Because the president is saying he wants to focus on funding for Ukraine first and then border security later.
That's another trick around here. You couple that stuff together to maybe try to get your main priority across. First time since I've been here that I've seen 41 Republicans say in the Senate, if there's not real correction at the border, that other stuff is going to be secondary. I hope we stick with it. That's all going to come down probably next week. Let's see.
So we've got this story, let's talk about the border for just a second because it's important. The White House attacked the state of Texas. Texas seized control of Shelby Park, where federal agents were processing illegal aliens. Texas said, no, we want to crack down and stop the chaos at the border. The White House was blaming the illegal immigrant deaths of 3 who drowned in the Rio Grande. It turns out that that's a fake story. That didn't happen. The story narrative line was that Texas was blocking Border Patrol from rescuing those individuals, but Texas, the White House, Border Patrol didn't hear about this until way after the deaths. So they didn't even know they were occurring. So again, this seems like another fake narrative coming out of the White House. That's what critics are saying.
Well, that's deflection minimally, and yes, it's trying to confuse the situation. I mean, what Governor Abbott is doing down there is because the federal government has been derelict. That now, at least in a state like mine, Indiana, has risen to the #1 issue. I was with 24 sheriffs about 2 months ago at Eagle Pass from Indiana because those effects, fentanyl, all the issues of what is this costing the federal government when you give them all the benefits of parole, where you might see someone in 4 to 5 years, that cumulatively is adding up. National security, to me, is the big threat. When I was down there about in 21, shortly after Biden took over, about 50 nationalities were coming across the border. Now, Liz, it's over 150, not to mention 60,000 gotaways a month. I mean, that is chaos on our southern border. Now we got chaos in the Mideast.
You know, staying on that for a second, Davos, the World Economic Forum, what's being called the Elites Jamboree. BlackRock Vice Chairman Philip Hildebrand said re-electing former President Trump would challenge Europe fundamentally, given Trump's determination to embrace America first in matters of trade, diplomacy, NATO funding, climate policy. What do you think of the elites worried about Trump getting reelected?
I think that is such a disconnect with reality. They're not talking to anyone on the street. They're not visiting their own citizens within the towns and states they live within, because anybody paying attention to that pulse knows that that doesn't make sense. And the more they harp on stuff like that, they're just avoiding the real problems that are out there. And the southern border is #1 right now.
Got it. Senator Mike Braun, thank you so much, sir, for joining us tonight. It's good to have you back on. Now, look who's